So here we are again. This is something that I look forward to every single week. And today is somebody that wears so many different hats. And we'll discover the kind of hats as soon as we get into conversation with Michael Abramson. Mike, it is wonderful to see you and be chatting with you.
Thank you, Stuart. Likewise, very nice to see you as well. We've had a long relationship over many, many years working together, so really great to have this chat with you.
I think it's nice for me to share with the people who watch these podcasts and links. I talk about many hats, but let's start with the world record that you broke and then owned. What was that?
Fair enough. So there's a long, interesting history about that because I'm a speed cuber. I solved the Rubik's Cube quickly. I used my memory and mind power techniques to be able to memorize all these algorithms. And I was at a speed cubing competition quite a few years ago. And one of the youngsters came up to me and said to me, "Why don't you do the pie challenge?" And I said to him, "What is the pie challenge?" And he said, "Go look it up because it's something that I think would appeal to you." And I did a bit of research and I found out that every year on the 14th of March, which is World International Pi Day, there are people who try and recall various digits of pi, which is, of course, a mathematical number that never ends. So in 2018, I started to work on it. And in 2019, I had the opportunity to try and beat what was then the South African record of 1,200 digits. So I decided I'll go for
Hold on,
1,000, yes,
1,200 digits.
1,200 digits, yes, of pi consecutively without a mistake. And it was done, I think, at that time in about half an hour. So I thought I'll try and go as fast as I can, blindfolded, and try and beat the record. But I needed to have four independent judges who could verify what I was doing. So I did that. And in 2019, I broke the world record for speed and the African and South African record for digits, 1,500 digits in 4 minutes and 7 seconds, blindfolded without error. And that opened up a lot of fantastic doors for me in terms of memory skills that I was able to use and train my brain to be able to remember that. So I got a lot of nice recognition from that. And then I decided, let me see if I can break my own record. But then COVID came along, of course, and made things a bit difficult. And in 2022, I went one better, going 2,000 digits of pi blindfolded in 5 minutes and 12 seconds without an error. And that's at a rate of almost 7 digits per second without a mistake. So I think that's a record that I don't think will ever be beaten, and I'm very proud to own it. But it has taken a lot of mental capacity and years out of my life to do it. But it's something that I think I will own for a long time.
I mean, and everyone talks about how bad their memory gets. I
Uh-huh.
don't remember phone numbers, but I guess because we store them in our phones, we don't need to anymore. And I
Correct.
think that's also probably a big negative is that we don't need to remember stuff because it's now so easy to find it. Um,
That's exactly right, Stuart. And not only that, but spelling. I do a lot of courses at schools. I go around to different schools and train learners how to study correctly and how to improve their memories. And I find people cannot spell even basic words because these days you don't need to know how to spell. There's spell checkers on computers, you get prompted on your phones. So you don't need to learn how to spell words. So you just don't. And you take the lazy option. And therefore your brain doesn't have to work. So it doesn't work. And that's absolutely what happens these days. So you're 100% right with that.
so you do memory skills as well. That's incredible. But haven't I seen you maybe with one of our clients working about how they can remember more? What are those kind of skills that you share with a corporate audience?
So what I enable people to do is to show them just how incredible the mind is. Because the problem is people get told at a young age, you don't have a good memory, or it's easy to go into default mode and say, my memory is terrible. Don't expect me to remember anything. I don't need to remember. I don't have a good memory. And you play it down, and therefore your brain automatically picks up on that. And subconsciously, your brain sends you messages it's okay not to remember. Whereas if you would look at it and twist it around and make it a bit more positive and say to yourself, I have a great memory. It might not be trained, but if I train it correctly, it's amazing what I would be able to recall. And that's what I show people, how you can actually recall pretty much anything in the space of about 10 or 15 minutes. I do an exercise with them where I say to them, I'm sure at the beginning you feel that this is an impossible task, but in 10 or 15 minutes' time, you will be able to remember an entire list of words I'm going to call out for you in order, forwards and backwards, and then be able to remember names and faces of random people and all sorts of facts about the world. And when they actually do it and see how easy it is, it inspires them to develop their mind power a lot more. They feel a lot more confident within themselves, and suddenly that negativity disappears, and they feel that they can pretty much conquer anything.
That must be
And I see
fantastic.
amazing results.
Yeah, that must be
Yes,
fantastic for salespeople, reps, people who need to remember names. I mean, how often,
correct.
you know the face, but you just can't think why you know them.
And it's easy to do. That's the thing that people don't understand. It's very, very easy to do. As a soccer commentator myself, I have to remember the names of pretty much every player who plays in the PSL. And not only for soccer, but I also do rugby commentary, cricket commentary, gymnastics, tennis, you name it, I cover it. And during the Olympics as well, you have all these sports people from many, many different countries. You need to talk about them, talk about what they've achieved, and you need to know how to recognize them, pronounce their names correctly, and get the phonetic pronunciation correct. So all these skills come in very, very useful in many different
I mean,
aspects of life.
that really does amaze me because it's not just a question of you having the list of the 23 box in front of you. I mean, you're
Correct.
probably more likely to know those, but you need to also know that this record that, say, Victor lost the number to Eben topped him by one this. You need to know what other records, who had the most caps, who was the most this, who was the prop
Correct.
that did that. So it's not you can't sit there with 1,000 pages in front of you. You'll never find the information when you need it.
Exactly. Not only can you not sit with 1,000 pages, you can't even sit with one page in front of you because it happens so quickly. I commentated the rugby test match this past weekend that you've alluded to, and you have to be able to recognize those players instantaneously when you're doing radio commentary. You don't have time to go, oh, the ball goes out to number six. Let me look on my list who number six is, because by that time, three other players have touched the ball and you've lost the momentum and you look up and you don't know what's happened. So you have to talk to pictures. You can have a few notes as a guide, but what I like to do is put the information into my memory beforehand, key points I'd like to talk about. And I often find that during a game, it gets so hectic that you don't even address some of the points that you had planned to talk about. But you need to be on the money, so to speak, and in the moment and be able to describe exactly what's going on, especially on radio where people can't see pictures. On television, it's a different skill because you have to talk to pictures, but also embellish the quality for the viewers and the listeners and add to what they can see themselves, giving them background information, statistics, and interesting facts and figures to enhance their experience.
I think one of the areas where you wowed me most when we first met is
Uh-huh.
your mentalism skills, your ability. Well, I'm wowed every time I see you, and you keep bringing in new. Can't call them tricks, illusions. I don't even know what the right word is, but you bring in something that we haven't seen before, and I'm always wowed by what you do, and so are your audiences. Why? How did you get into that in the first place? Were you a magician to start with?
Well, thanks for the kind words, Stuart. I really appreciate it. You've been a big fan of mine for a long time, so I really appreciate all the opportunities you've created for me. Yes, I started off, I had an interest in magic, got into the magic worlds via the route that a lot of people get into, doing kids' birthday parties and seeing the excitement in these young faces when you perform a miracle for them or what they perceive to be a miracle. But I always found that every show was very similar. When you're doing a magic show, the equipment often has built-in secret compartments or whatever it is, and every single show is exactly the same. And then in the late 1990s, I was introduced to a mentalist who came out to South Africa. And I thought to myself, I
Was
didn't
he
know what
someone's
mentalism
sham?
was.
What was his name? That
Uh, there, there,
professor.
there, there, there were actually a few. There was one from America called Mark Salem,
That's him.
who came out here.
We
But
saw
then
him
there's also
together.
Max. Yes,
Incredible.
correct.
Yeah.
And Max Maven, who has been a big inspiration of mine, who passed away recently, but fantastic mentalist. I've watched all his videos, his DVDs, and learned a lot from him. And actually had a chance to see his show live in New York, which was fantastic as well. But when I discovered there was this technique or this art form effectively called mentalism. I thought this fits me like a glove because it uses memory techniques, it uses psychology, it uses mathematics and predictions and mind reading and all these different skills knitted together. And you have to be able to think on your feet. And because of my years working on radio and television, you have to learn to think on your feet. So I think it fits my performance style very well. And when I learned you could do something like that, it opened up a whole new avenue for me. And I put in a lot of work, read up about psychology, worked on probability and what audiences are likely to do, and then started to develop my own routines, theater shows, corporate shows, and it just mushroomed from there. And it's a very, very exciting art form. No two shows are the same because even if you perform the same material, the way the audience reacts to it is completely different. So you can have, if I have a stage run, for example, of a theater show, you can perform the same material every night, but every show is completely different because you're so dependent on your volunteers, how they react, whether they pick up on your signals or not. Some people are easy to read, some people are harder to read. And it just makes it challenging, keeps you on your feet. You're exhausted at the end of it, but it's very, very rewarding.
It's true. And you know what? Also, you've got a lovely way with the audience. You've got a nice sense of humor, but you never put anybody down. And you know, I hate those shows where
Yes.
the laugh is at someone's expense. You know, you don't do that. You don't find that necessary.
No, the same thing as I find swearing, comedians who use swearing in their act, maybe it works for them. There are a lot of comedians who perform clean acts. They don't need to use swear words to hide their skills. Their comedy does it for themselves. And for me, I've always found that if you belittle an audience member, you're not going to have the response from the audience. Nobody's going to want to come up on stage and be belittled in front of a big audience of people. So you treat people with respect because they are your show. And if they have a good experience, everybody else is going to want to come up and participate. And people are going to give you good feedback. They're going to comment on how much they enjoyed the experience. Whereas if you make an audience member uncomfortable, the rest of the audience almost sides with them subconsciously against the performer. And you're fighting a losing battle. So that's never been my style, to belittle people, to embarrass people. Sometimes people are very nervous on stage, and you might have to explain to them 2 or 3 times what you need them to do. But that's
Doesn't
fine.
matter.
The fact that they're giving up their time to provide me with a person to work with is fantastic, and I really appreciate people who do that. And as a result, I need to treat them with the utmost respect because if they're not up there, I don't have a show effectively. So treating audience members with respect is absolutely something that I treasure and I've always done throughout my career.
I think it might be fun if you're up for it, for us to just
Yes.
do something where you can read my mind or whatever. What is there something that comes to mind for you that you could do that would work
Well,
in this format?
reading minds on behind a computer screen is a bit difficult because I can't see your entire body language and
Ah,
I need
okay.
to have different cues. So maybe we can do something in terms of memory. There's
All
a
right.
nice routine that I perform on cruise ships when I work internationally because I find international audiences, particularly well-traveled audiences, are familiar with a lot of places in the world. And what I did as a memory technique many years ago is I sat down and I memorized the names, capitals, and flags of every single country in the world, all the independent countries in the world. So maybe if you want to, if you're up for it, you can make it as obscure as possible. It just needs to be an independent country.
All
So you
right.
can give me any random country in the world, and I'll try and give you some information. And I assure you, I'm looking at the screen in front of me. I'm seeing your picture on the screen. I don't have the flags of every country in the world on my screen. I would happily do this
Okay.
in person to anybody
I'm
who
going to
stops
use
me.
my phone to help me. Okay, you have to
No
promise me
problem.
that my memory doesn't count on this.
No problem. You just give me a country and I will tell you what I can.
Okay, so you want me to tell you the name of the country?
So give me a country and I
Yeah.
will give you all sorts of information from memory of what I've been able
Okay.
to lock into my brain about that country.
All right.
Be nice. No,
Albania.
it's fine.
Albania.
Albania. All right. Albania is a country in the eastern side of Europe. The capital is Tirana, Tirana, although some people pronounce it Tirane, and I've seen that spelling as well. The flag is actually two eagles who look as if they've been squashed together. They're black eagles on a red background, and they almost facing each other. You can't really tell that they're eagles. I have a problem in interpreting that, but people say that they are They eagles that are on the flag, black on a red background. And
Correct.
Albania is a country it borders a number of countries in that region of the world, Bulgaria and Greece and countries around that area, Romania just above Bulgaria, and then Moldova is a little slip of country just to the north of that. But that's what I can tell you about Albania.
Population?
Population, I haven't studied populations, that I can't tell you about. I do
I
flags,
don't I
capitals,
don't
and
know
countries.
either, by the way, if it's
And
any.
and the thing is, it changes all the time. So population figures are very misrepresented because censuses are coming out all the time. So I didn't learn population, but I
Okay,
can tell
so
you
look,
flags, capitals, and
let's
countries.
see if I can get my phone in front of, there we are.
Yes,
There's the
there you
map,
go.
there's the flag.
There's
My
the
virtual
Eagles.
background messes around with it a bit. And yes, you're quite right. Red flag, and they are back-to-back eagles. That's
Correct.
incredible. And that,
We
Mike,
can do
you
one
also
more if you'd like.
go on then. Okay,
Okay, give me one more country and let's do one more just for fun.
Bolivia.
Okay, Bolivia is one of the countries in South America that used to have a coastline. It lost its coastline in the war. So the flag's very colorful, like a lot of the South American countries. It's a green stripe, a yellow stripe, sorry, and a red stripe. The capital is La Paz, which
Which
is one
colors
of
at the
the
top?
green, green, yellow, and red.
Oh,
And it has
close.
also or red, yellow, and green. But what it has is it's got its coat of arms in the center of the flag, a little almost a circular picture with a bird and an
Oh,
eagle, and that has two capitals. That's the interesting thing about Bolivia. Yeah, there you go. Yes, red, yellow, and green, correct.
yeah.
It has this coat of arms in the center. But what's interesting is it has the highest capital in the world in La Paz, capital at the highest altitude, but it also uses Sucre as its alternative capital, which is its legislative capital. So it actually has two capitals, unlike South Africa, which has three. But La Paz is the best known one. La Paz or La Paz in Spanish means the peace. And it's a city supposedly all about peace, but Sucre is the sort of legislative and government capital. So they use both capitals, both at high altitude, but it lost a lot of its coastline, I think, to Peru, if I remember correctly. So it doesn't have a big slice of coastline that it used to have. It lost it in the war many years ago.
So, Mike, how many, just a matter of interest, how many countries are there? How many are there in your memory bank?
Um, Independently, 197. Although there are new countries coming in all the time, countries renaming themselves. For example, Macedonia became North Macedonia a short while ago. There's a country called East Timor, which is also known as Timor-Leste, and various other names. So you're constantly learning countries. South Sudan, of course, split from Sudan in 2011. It has its own flag. Capitals are changing all the time. And for example, a country like Burundi in Africa used to have a capital, Bujumbura. It's now changed to Gitega. Names are changing of capitals and countries. So you've got to keep up to date with all of that. But what I've also done is memorize all the flags of the states of America and all their capitals. And those flags change regularly. I see Utah has just changed their flag. Minnesota's just changed its flag. So you try and keep up to date with things because I have a lot of Americans in my audience. And I say to them, what state are you from? And they tell me, and I say, let me tell you a little bit about your state and which states it borders. And they love that because they feel it's personal and they know
Good.
that it's a skill that people can learn. So it hits home with them. And I think they find it receptive and enjoyable for them because of the fact that it's something that uniquely affects them in their day-to-day life.
You mentioned the Rubik's Cube.
Yes.
How do you, I mean, I've seen videos of kids, they juggle with them and they change them and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Why did it fascinate you? Just because it was another challenge?
I guess so, Stuart. When I was at school many years ago, people were thrilled if they could solve one side of a cube. And it's always something that I enjoyed learning how to do, a very rudimentary basic method. And then gradually, as speed cubing came into being, I've learned all the algorithms. So the problem is I don't have the dexterity in my fingers to be able to turn the cube as a 14-year-old, for example, would be able to do. My mind works very sharply and I can look at the cube and say, okay, I know this move. It's R prime U, R prime L prime F, whatever it is. And I have all the codes in my head in
Oh,
terms of how to
really?
turn the cube.
Yeah.
Yes, there are 146 different algorithms that I learned for the different cases. So I know how to do them, but unfortunately my hands don't move as quickly as as a youngster would. I don't have that dexterity in my fingers, so I can solve it in my mind very, very quickly. But when I actually execute, my record might be about 10, 12, 15 seconds, whereas the youngsters these days are solving the cube in 4 and 5 seconds. So, but I find it a really good exercise, not to boast about what you can do in terms of the mind, but also to give yourself a mind exercise to keep the brain cells sharp. And when I'm doing demonstrations and I go and talk, for example, at an assembly at a school or talk to a group of corporate clients, and I say to them, here's a Rubik's Cube, and they say to me, can you solve it? Solve it for me quickly. And then I'll do a routine with them, a mind reading memory routine, and they excited because they're familiar with what it is. They know that it is a standard object that they would be able to see in their day-to-day life. It's not a gimmicked item that you've bought from a magic shop. So I think that is the appeal of it. But it's very, very good as a brain exercise to keep your brain sharp and to keep your memory focused by being able to remember different algorithms. And I do work on it constantly to try and improve those algorithms to try and speed up my time a bit.
And it's such great fun to watch. Okay, let's wrap up.
Mm.
I mean, there's so much that we could go on discussing. Let's wrap up. Tell me about Noord for Noord. What happened there? Because it's Afrikaans is not your first language. So what
No.
happened?
These days, it's probably becoming my third language, Afrikaans, because I taught myself to speak Spanish off the internet because for international work, a lot of people speak Spanish. So actually, using memory skills off the internet, I learned to speak Spanish, and I have a lot of language exchange programs with people around the world who have Spanish as a first language. So I speak English to them, they answer me in Spanish, then I speak Spanish to them, they answer me in English, and we have chats and endure language skills. So yes, Afrikaans is it's something I actually learned by listening to sports commentary when I was younger, because I wanted to know what the cricket scores were. And the only way to do that was to listen to Afrikaans radio. So I picked up a lot of terms. I can commentate fluently in many different sports in Afrikaans, even though in my day-to-day life, I don't speak it regularly. But what happened was there was this opportunity to go on Noord for Noord. I saw notification of an audition process which was happening. I'd actually been on the show in 2000, many, many years ago, and reached the semifinals that year. But I was very shy in those days. I didn't have the personality I have now, and I was very intimidated by TV cameras. But now in 2019, I had the opportunity to go back on the show. It was a fantastic experience, one of the highlights of my life. I was told 2 weeks before the first audition, go and memorize as much as you can. So I sat listening to Afrikaans music and learning lyrics for 2 weeks, literally solidly. And I memorized probably the lyrics of about 1,000 different songs, listened to popular songs, listened to as much as I could, made mental notes in my mind, and then passed the audition, got onto the show. I think I had about a week before the first episode was recorded. First episode went really well. I think a lot of my competitors were intimidated by the TV cameras, which is something that doesn't really faze me. So I had a bit of an advantage in that regard. Got through my first show and then got into the semifinals and played against these two outstanding competitors whose music knowledge was just brilliant and they're Afrikaans speaking. So I really had a challenge. I was behind throughout that show and then got on a roll and suddenly was able to pick up a lot of points and made it through in the end. I then made it to the final, which was very, very exciting and very nerve-wracking, and built up a massive lead. And right at the end of the final, there's the final round, there are a lot of points on offer, a lot of money that you can win. And my competitor did fantastically well, answered 3 songs in a row, and it came down to the very, very last song of the entire series. They played me 2 notes, an Afrikaans song, and I thought, I think I know what the song is. I'm not sure, but I'm going to go for it and guess it. It was Mama ek wil 'n man hê. And they played me 2 notes. So in da and I thought, let me take a chance. And luckily I was right and I won that series. I think I'm only the second English speaking person to ever win a series on Noord for Noord. It was also Emma Adams's first series as a presenter. So that was exciting as well. Fantastic experience, really enjoyable, opened lots of doors. And that happened just 2 months after I'd broken the pi record in the world record in 2019. So 2019 was a
Good
really good
year.
year for me in terms of that. Yes.
Final question. Do you sleep at
Mm-hmm.
night? I mean, does this brain of yours ever rest?
I don't know that it ever rests. I do sleep and I have good quality sleep. But what I also try and do, which is a very useful tip, I try and swim every single day if I possibly can, or at least 5 times a week for about an hour and a half to 2 hours at a time. Because what I find it does is I'm able to switch off completely and just have me time. I'm in the pool. I don't swim very well. I don't swim very fast, but I try and do about 150 to 200 lengths in a gym sized pool every day, or at least 2 days in every three. And what I do while I'm relaxing, my brain just has a chance to almost unwind, to free think different things, and I come up with some of my best ideas, new routines for shows, or ideas for my broadcasts, because I present a show also. I present a sports show every night on SAfm from Monday to Friday between 7 and 8. On national radio, we have about 1 million listeners. So I come up with quiz questions while I'm in the pool. I come up with ideas for interviews that I might want to do, or thinking about ahead to future broadcasts. So that's my time effectively to just let my brain do its own thing and decide what it wants to do, and just come up with ideas. And many of my best ideas come about when I'm supposedly mentally relaxing, although physically exerting myself. And I find that that's a really good thing to do, just to switch off, not to worry about anybody else or anything for those 2 hours of the day, and just allow myself to to come up with whatever ideas my mind wants to suggest to me.
Well, I must say that I get exhausted just talking to you. I mean, I'm thinking about it now, and you are wearing me out. You're a mentalist, entertainer, broadcaster, record breaker, study skills master. What's next?
I don't know. I let every day decide for itself what it's going to do. There's so many doors that are opening at the moment, Stuart. I'm getting a lot of international work, both on the broadcasting side and the mentalism side. There's so many possibilities. Cruise ships. I love traveling on cruise ships. I'm developing new acts for cruise ships, putting in new material all the time. Targeting different schools to be able to go and talk to and present some of the skills to staff, learners, parents, universities, colleges, corporate clients, giving them new exciting options of what they can do, both learning experiences and entertainment experiences. And I've also been offered, I don't want to give too much information away, but in the next little while to go and do public address announcing on a major event which I've never tackled before. So it's going to be very, very exciting if it happens towards the end of the month of October. So looking forward to that and seeing what doors that opens. But my philosophy in life is always, if a door closes, and there will always be people who don't like you, don't like what you do, have a personal grudge against you for whatever reason. So if a particular door closes, or many doors close, just make sure that you open other doors. Keep other doors open all the time, because opportunities will always knock. And if you see them and grab them, there's no limit to what you can achieve.
Now, I'm really sorry that I asked you what next. Mike, I can't wait to see your next show and see what you've been working on and developing. And thank you for your time.
Only a pleasure, Stuart. Thank you for everything. Long may this relationship continue. It's been a pleasure over many, many years to work with you, and I look forward to the continued success.
Thanks, bye.